Hello everybody, welcome in this video. So today I want to talk about a little about DevOps and DCOS. Actually, I want to share the knowledge that I created. I had to do an internal demo for my fellow in Microsoft, and I think it would be great to share for people who want to start on DCOS, maybe discover DCOS and how you can do DevOps on DCOS. I'm not a big expert on DCOS, just to be clear. But like I say, it's more because I want to share, and maybe some people can get knowledge and can have some hints and cool cool nuggets, cool hoodies, cool goodies from this video. So yeah. About me, my name is Julien Stroiker, so you can reach me at justro _stro at Twitter. So if you have questions, it will be a pleasure to share with you and try to answer maybe your answer your question about DevOps and maybe Microsoft or Azure and etc. So let's get started. So for this demo, what I did just as prerequisite, I just deploy DCOS cluster. So I'm using Azure on that case. I'm not going to talk about Azure, don't worry, guy, but just for people who are interested, it's really easy on Azure to start with DCOS. You just do a search for create a new Azure Container Services. And when you're doing that, you're going to ask you which orchestrator you want to use for the second step here. And I pick DCOS. So you can also use Kubernetes and Swarm, but for this video, like I said, we're going to talk about DCOS. I just did that. And when it's done, as you can see here, deployment succeeded. I have my cluster with a bunch of VM, bunch of services, but we're not going to focus on that. The main point, again, it's when you're done, you just have to initiate a SSH connection, like I did here, actually. I create that, so that's this command here. SSH, the username, the name of the cluster. I'm using a private key on the port 2200, and I'm doing SSH tunneling connection port 80 on my machine to the port 80 on the master of the cluster. That's it. I already did that, and when it's done, you can enter localhost on your navigator, on your browser. Here, this is what I'm gonna do, and you're gonna access to DCOS. So no rocket science here, it's really simple, right? So yeah, so today we're gonna talk about one project that I love called Path Limited MRP. It's a basic application, a Java application actually running on Mongo, Tomcat, and using Java. So we have the order API project. So that's basically a MVC, MVC application using Spring on Java. And we have the client part, which is a JavaScript frontend, right? It's really simple. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to use the universal tool called Jenkins to do build. So if you go on the universe section from the DCOS dashboard here, so this is where you're supposed to arrive when you do localhost. Click on universe and go on Jenkins, click on install package. And you can just go with the basic deployment, and you're gonna say success. It's really fast. And behind the scene, if we're opening another tab and do localhost -marathon, so it's not localhost, it's localhost -marathon, which is the framework that DCOS using behind the scene to orchestrate all the deployment. You can see that it's deploying Jenkins, right? Using 1 CPU and 2 GB of RAM. So we're gonna wait. All right, so Jenkins is not running, as you can see here. If we go back on DCOS here and click on services, you can see that Jenkins is running actually. You can click on this logo here and it will open Jenkins. So it's really simple, right? So we have now one Jenkins instance running on our cluster using Mesos and Marathon and so on, which is really, really cool. The second step that we're gonna need, it's another tool called VAMP. If we go back on Universe here, I think it's available here. Let me check. Yeah, it's there, is that tool. But I think, in my point of view, it's way more simple to deploy from, because if we're doing that here and start, you're going to ask you for a bunch of prerequisites like Elasticsearch URL and that kind of stuff. So if you start from scratch, what you can do, you can go on vamp.io, which is the official website, go on documentation section, and go on install. In our case, we want to install it on DCOS. You can scroll down, and it told you, so first read all the documentation, but it told you that we have to create an Elasticsearch instance, and then we're going to be ready to install VAMP. So what we can do, we can just copy this section. So that part here, supposed to, copy on the clipboard. So it copied the Elasticsearch section. So back to Marathon here. Marathon. So localhost whack Marathon. Click on Create Application here. Go on JSON mode and paste what you have on clipboard, which is the Elasticsearch instance, and click on Create Application. So it's going to deploy a basic Elasticsearch instance, and that instance, this Elasticsearch instance, will be the backend for our VAMP services. So when I think, it's deploying. So back to the VAMP documentation, the second step, the second and last step will be to deploy the VAMP itself services. So again, same thing, copy to the clipboard, and we're going to wait that just to make sure that that one is deploying. All right, so now that the Elasticsearch is running correctly, same thing, create application. Go on, click on JSON mode toggle, and we're going to pass the configuration and just create application. That's it. So after a few seconds, suppose, so now we have the VAMP folder, and you're going to see, so first it's calling, the first service is called VAMP, but it's going to deploy a bunch of different services. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly explain the concept of VAMP and why we're going to use it. When I do some search, like I say, in my case, I want to demonstrate how we can do DevOps using DCOS and real application, so the parts limited application. And I found this tool, and some people are talking about this tool, so I say, hey, let's give it a try. The cool thing with VAMP, it's kind of a built-in wrapper with a bunch of different services to help you to do canary and A/B testing. So what I mean with that, it's with DCOS, let's say not the pain, but if you started like me in the past, just to start with DCOS, you have to understand all the concepts. It could be complicated to understand how it works and how it works everything. You have this concept of Marathon LB and how you can make sure that if you're deploying one services, let's say a basic engineering services, you want to make sure that each services and only the services is accessible from the outside of the cluster with all the load balancer rules and concept, and make sure that only that services have access from the outside, right? If you're deploying database, you don't want that give access to all the cluster from the outside. So you have to learn about the concept of Marathon LB. So again, from the universe here, Marathon is the most common one. So that one, you can click on install. And if you read about it on internet, you're going to see that it works with tags on the deployment. We also have the Minuteman. I don't know if he's there. No, he's not there, but Minuteman is also another popular one. But yeah, and then if you want to do A/B testing, that means you're going to have to play with the Marathon LB and do some magic. So yeah, it could be complicated. Oh, not Marathon, but Marathon-LB. I'm going to show you the project on GitHub actually here. So yeah, it could be complicated when you start using it, and think about that. It's really manually. For sure, it's more granularly, and you have a bunch of different options. But if you want to do A/B testing, I think, or canary testing or A/B testing, let me check. A/B, no. Testing, it's not documented, but I know that there is a section, I don't remember where, but somewhere is there, zero downtime deployment. So you have to use the zdd.py scripts. And yeah, I tried to find a bunch of documentation. So yeah, the blue-green apps and so on. So it's really complicated. In my point of view, maybe I'm missing some stuff, but yeah, it was really complicated and really hard to explain, and no really documentation about that Python script here. So I'd say, okay, some people talk me about VAMP, and I start to using it, and it's really convenient. I mean, it's cool because it's managing the load balancer stuff, and you have the way by routing and load balancing. I'm going to show you that. using gateway to say, I want to redirect 90% of my traffic on that services and 10% on the new services when you want to scale your application, and so on and so on. So let's back to our deployment. As you can see here on the VAMP folder, we have a bunch of services who's running right now. So yeah, as you can see, even the installation is really simple, right? So what I can do, back to the DCOS, again, back to services, I can click on VAMP here. On the first one, the only one with this little logo with the arrow here, you can click here, and same thing as Jenkins, you're gonna open the dashboard for VAMP, right? So yeah, that's VAMP. So now that we have all components installed, which is Jenkins in our case and VAMP, we're going to start to talk about our application. And like I said, my application, which is party limited MRP, that one here, have 3 different components. I'll talk about the order, API, the clients, and the database. So we're not going to focus on the stateful services, the database Mongo. I'm going to deploy it. I'm not doing DevOps and that kind of stuff for sure. In my point of view, I would prefer to use PaaS solution, but to keep that simple, we're going to deploy that inside the cluster. So what you can do, so we are on deployment section on VAMP, and because I'm going to show you how it's work, we're going to click on the add new deployment here, and we're going to deploy our database. So I already have my YAML file set up, but yeah, so the deployment works with YAML, which is really cool and really convenient. And what we're going to say to VAMP, we want to deploy a new, we want to create a new deployment called POMRP database, right? With one service called PO database, yeah, POMRP database. So we call that breed. So breed in VAMP, it's the breed, so the resources that we want to deploy. In our case, it's a Docker machine, a Docker images. So we're going to use party limited MRP WAC database. So last thing that I want to show you, it's we're going to use Docker Hub in our case. So here, and I have one organization called party limited MRP, and we're going to use that one, database, party limited database, right? So that's the one that we want to deploy. So back to VAMP here. And we're going to use the default port because, again, it's a Mongo database. So we're going to use the default port, the 2717 on inside the containers. And the scale is the resources that we're going to consume inside the Mesos cluster. So we're going to consume half of one CPU and 500 megs of RAM. And we want only one instance, right? So we're going to click on Save here. And it's deploying. And the cool thing with that, it's going to talk to DCOS or Marathon, it's the same thing, right? And as you can see here, it created the deployment, so the folder called pods, POMRP database, and it's deploying here the Docker image inside the cluster. So for people who know a little more Marathon and DCOS always works, so behind the scene, if you go on the configuration section, click on Edit here, and go in JSON mode, the cool thing created all the configuration for you with the port and the service port and so on, which is pretty neat, I think. So yeah. So our database is running here. So that's it. We just deploy one application thanks to VAMP. And if we click here, you can see, so you have a few indications, the earth of the application, the CPU consumption and the memory, and that's it, right? We have this concept of gateway. This means how you can reach each services inside the cluster thanks to gateway. So as I told you, VAMP is kind of wrapper with all that stuff like the load balancing, the routing, the service discovery, and so on. So the gateway, it's one layer on the top of the deployment. How you can reach, so in that case, inside the cluster, or you can reach your services, right? So in my case, I can reach my services to the port 40,000, right, TCP. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat, right, to keep that simple. I'm going to change the source, click on Edit, and I'm going to change the ports of my services, and I'm going to use, for the gateway, the same port inside the cluster, inside the services, right? So I'm going to use that guy here. I think I have to change here. Let's check. We can save. No, sorry. So what I have to do, it's that one that we want to change. The port here, right? And click on save. Yeah. So now you can see we can reach the application through the port 27017. We can reach the gateway first, and then the gateway gonna reach the database, right? So we have our database. So we're not going to touch a lot about that one. It's deployed, it works. So the next step that we're going to deploy is the API by itself. So for sure, we can still deploy using the same concept of click on new and create a YAML file, but that's it, right? But in our case, what we want to do, we want to automate the deployment because the main goal of this video is to talk about DevOps for sure. So I'm going to show you how you can do DevOps and how thanks to Jenkins, we can talk to our cluster, right? So I already prepared that. If you go on the port limiter MRP repository again, let's start with the API, the order API here. We have, as we call, Jenkins files here. So the Jenkins files, it's something that I really like. It's come with Jenkins 2.0. It's kind of, as I like to call it, CI as code. So continuous integration as code. So the cool thing, you can define a code in this Jenkins files and say, here what I want to do during my continuous integration, during my build. So first, I want to clone the repo. Then I want to do Docker build using this credential because I don't want to store the credential inside the public repository, right? So I'm going to store and use the key inside Jenkins with this ID called Docker Hub. And I'm going to do Docker login using this key, the username and the password, push the image that we built, and then do a bunch of different things. I'm going to go back. I'm going to talk about that later. And that's last section here is how we can talk to the VAMP services. First, what I want to do, because I'm using Docker image, I want to show you the Docker file that I have for this image. It's very basic and straightforward. I'm using the OpenJDK official image because, again, it's a Java application. I'm just copying the source code and I'm building the code and running a shell script and exposing the port 8080, right? So how you can call the Jenkins file from the Jenkins inside the cluster? It's really simple. So I'm going to create a new job. I think it's not a job. Yeah, it's a job. Use the pipeline feature because, again, this is what we want. We want to use the Jenkins file. I'm going to call it POMRP API. Let's say that. It's the pipeline. Click on OK. And it's really simple, actually. You're going to see that. The only thing that we have to set up and change, it's at the bottom. We're going to give to Jenkins the URL of the repo. In our case, it's this URL here. So we're going to copy it. And we're going to click on definition here and say we already have the pipeline from the source control management, and it's a git SCM. This is the URL that I want you to use, and the name of the file is Jenkins files, and we can click on save. That's it. So we're not gonna build now because if you remember well, inside the file, inside the Jenkins file here, you have this thing said, hey, for that step here, we want you to use credential, right? And I don't want to store my credential inside the public repo. I want you to store it inside the Jenkins vaults. So we're going to do that. So back to Jenkins here. Go on the credential section. Here, we're going to add that on the global scope. Click on add credential. It's username and its password. Click on the global scope and the username. So I'm going to use my credential. The ID, this is where you have to specify the same ID here, credential ID. So that's Docker Hub in my case. And the description, you can put whatever you want, but I'm just going to paste the same thing. So click on OK. And that's it. So now we have our new credential. And for that step here, you're going to call it and use as the username that we specify, and same thing for the password, right? Perfect. So now what I can do, I can now explain the second part of the script. So I explained the build part. So first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to launch now the build because it's going to take time, at least for the first time. So for that guy here, I'm ready now to build. So I'm going to click on build, and that's it. So the cool thing, just as a little note about that, how Jenkins works inside the DCOS cluster, it's really cool because it's going to leverage the Mesos capabilities. It means that when we deploy the Jenkins services inside DCOS, we deploy the master container. So it's running inside Docker, right? So this is this interface, this is the master. But when you're going to trigger a new build, you're going to use a task in Mesos. So that means you're going to ask Marathon and Mesos. So here, as you can see on the Jenkins part, I have my master running. I only have one instance. But when I'm launching a new build, you're going to ask Mesos, hey, do you have more resources to create a new containers? And because here, in my case, I need to do stuff. So here. And here, you're going to create one instance and one task in a separate containers, not inside the master. That means if you trigger 10 different builds, you can create 10 different tasks in 10 different containers, and so on and so on. So, which is really powerful. And you don't have one VM with everything on it, right? So with this, it's the concept of master and slave, but in the containerized mode, using and leverage Mesos and Docker, which is really, really cool. You have nothing to do. It's already there. It's already prepared for you. So it's really cool. So it's building, right? So here, just you see it works well. That's the basic output that we want from Docker, right? Is building my image, and we're gonna see if the push and so on works. So back to our Jenkins files now. What I'm doing here, I'm leveraging the YAML definition. I'm going to show you that after. So after the build, the push inside the Docker Hub, what I want to do, I want to deploy inside my cluster, inside VAMP. But like I told you, and like I show you, VAMP using the YAML definition. So what I want to do, I want to prepare on the side some files with the configuration that I want set up with the gateway, the ports, the breed, and the different options that I show you for the database. Same thing for the older API that we want to deploy. I'm going to change few stuff like the build ID, the tags, because you're going to understand later, I want to do A/B testing. So that means I'm going to have every time two different deployments, the current deployment, let's say the version 3, and the next deployment, let's say version 4. And what I want to do at the end, when I'm deploying the version 4, which is a new version of my API with some fixes or new features, what I want to do maybe, in that case, what we're going to do, we're going to deploy first, we're going to pro 50-50, we're going to redirect 50% of the traffic on the both containers, so version 3 and version 4, and the VNext version 4. And where we are comfortable, we're going to redirect 100% on the new version. And that's it. We just roll out a new version of the application. You're going to understand, I hope you're going to understand with the demo. So for that, we have to prepare a bunch of file configuration. I'm using C.I and replacing some stuff. I'm going to show you right after what's this CMR file. And then I'm curling the API on the top of VAMP to push this different YAML configuration here. So the first one, I want to deploy my application. It's basically doing the same stuff that I did for part-limited MRP database, but calling the YAML file. So here I'm calling the PU MRP order deploy YAML, the first one. It's a YAML file, and I'm calling the service discovery inside the DCOS cluster. So that's one important concept that you have to understand when you're using DCOS with Marathon and Mesos. We have this service discovery, and how it works, it's mean here, as you can see, I'm calling Mesos, Marathon, VAMP. That means if you want to have an easy way to understand that, if I'm going back to Marathon here, as you can see, VAMP, it's inside one folder called VAMP. So that one here. And I have this service, so that's the service I'm using, that's the master one, VAMP. So again, VAMP folder, VAMP. And that guy is running on Marathon here, and the framework and the cluster is running on Mesos. So if you want to reach any application, for example, my database here is going to be, so let me show you that. The basic Notepad stuff. For all the services, going to be Mesos at the end. If it's deployed thanks to Marathon, it's going to be Marathon at the beginning. Marathon here. And then depends if you have folder or the architecture that you have inside Marathon. For example, for VAMP here, it's a folder called VAMP. So I have to put VAMP. And inside this folder, the service is called VAMP again. So this is all inside my cluster, I can reach that guy. And the thing is, if you're deploying a random application like an Nginx or whatever application inside Docker, the same thing. Inside this container, because the networking is handled by DCOS and so on and so on, if you want to reach one cluster or one container inside the container from the inside of other container, whatever the agents, the node where it's deployed, you can reach it using this service discovery DNS, so the Mesos DNS. I hope it's clear. So this is what I'm doing here, actually. So I'm calling the, let's say, the master VAMP, it's the API. This is the service port inside the cluster. So here on VAMP, if I click on VAMP, I can go on configuration. No, sorry, on the instance here. So that guy here. And this is the port. I know that you have more simpler, maybe there are simpler way to do that, but this is the way, that way it works. So I have to change that guy once and then it works. And then I'm reaching the API of VAMP again. And if you want more information about that, you have documentation. I think it's on API documentation here. And it told you how you're supposed to reach different stuff. So me, in that case, I'm using the deployment API. And this is how I can create. So I have to do post request using the API WAC v1 deployments. And this is what I'm doing here. So I'm going to deploy. I'm going to move the gateway. So like I told you, 50-50%. I'm using the approval step from Jenkins. So you're going to see, going to ask me before the deployment if I want to approve or not and move forward for the next step. Same thing for the full. And then I'm doing cleaning. I'm removing the old deployment. So you're going to understand, I hope you're going to understand with the demo. I'm going to show you the YAML file here on the deploy folder. So this is the YAML file for the application. So it's, again, same thing, the name. So I'm using kind of tags. And like I told you, doing a seed command, I'm replacing that with the build definition number of Jenkins. I'm going to show you that. So for example, here, it's a POMRD order, comma, ID tags. I'm replacing that doing the build with the Jenkins number. Same thing for here, here, here. So whenever you seeing the ID tag, I replace that with the Jenkins build number. So this is the name of the services. This is the name of the Docker Hub image that I want to deploy, the ports, and I'm using one environment variables. So if you want to understand that, it's inside the code, the Java code, how the API inside the container is calling and reaching the database. It's inside the code for sure. I'm using the service discovery. So same thing here, as you can see, POMRP database, Marathon Mesos. This is why I explain you with the Mesos DNS. And yeah, so if we go back here, as you can see, we have green everywhere. And here it's waiting for my approval to move the gateway 50-50. So let's see in VAMP if we have something. So we have something, which is cool. We have, as you can see now, a new deployment called POMRP order, comma 1. So as you can see here, I'm running the build number 1. And this is here. So let me show you back in the Jenkins file here. This is what I'm doing here, actually. I'm doing seed -i. So yeah, that's a basic seed command, but I'm replacing the ID tag with the build number, right, inside this folder. So this is why here, oops, sorry, VAMP, we have that guy here. It's running. So that means if I'm going back on Marathon here, go back to the basic here. So that's the win number. So that's the thing that I discovered with VAMP. I'm going to open a case and ask the question to the VAMP team what we have there. So when you're deploying basic, you're doing the basic YAML deployment like I did for polysomity, it's clean. But when you're using something with the comma, so you remember here, this is what I'm doing here. Up on the YAML. When you're doing something like this, I don't know why it generated a bunch of number here. So when you have a lot of deployment, it could happen that you have a lot of kind of garbage folder, but whatever. So that's my application. It's running actually, right? And back to VAMP. So again, deployment is there. If I go on the gateways, it create a gateway here, that guy here, and so on, so on. So what I'm going to do, just to show you, and because the first deployment, I cannot do a 50-50 deployment with only one deployment. I have to relaunch the deployment to have a second deployment. You're going to understand. So I'm going to click on airport, and also to show you that Jenkins works with that step. So yeah. And I'm going to, again, click on build now. Oh, and by the way, I'm not using CI, continuous integration. The fact that I want Jenkins automatically to trigger the pipeline when I'm pushing the code. I can do that, but it's manually. But also you can trigger like I did build now, just for the demo. And because I'm using Docker, it's on the same instance. It's really now fast, and that's the beauty of Docker development. As you can see now, it took less than let's say 4 seconds to do everything. And it's supposed to talk to VAMP and have a new deployment, which is the 2, because again, that's deployment number 2 here. So let's wait this deployment to be done. Again, let's check quickly on Marathon what we have. We have a second deployment, is that one, is deploying. So it's deployed. As you can see, we have 1 and 2, right? And what we're going to do, we're going to say, okay, I want you now to do 50-50 deployment. And again, he stopped to say, hey, now it's time to move full. So that means that step, what I did inside my pipeline, we're supposed to have a new gateway called POMRP API, is that one. And let me show you the YAML file. So we have a bunch of different information, but the most important part, we add a virtual host called API POMRP Julien Work. As you can see here, that's a custom one. That's my custom DNS name, julien.work, that I'm managing using GoDaddy. I'm going to show you that. But here, what I'm doing on that one here, as you can see, I have 50% of my traffic redirect to the 1 and 50 to number 2, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to go on here, my domain name. I'm going to create a new CNAME entrance and say for the host, it's api.pomrp, right? Again, I'm on julien.work, my custom DNS name. And I want to point to my cluster. So that's the name of the cluster on Azure. So my VIP, my virtual IP from not the master, but the agent is that one here. I'm going to copy that guy, and I want you to redirect here. And that's it. That's the endpoint that I have on Azure on my DCOS cluster. I want you, when you have this entrance here, redirect to that guy here. And because I have VAMP on the top of it, it's going to handle the rest and the other aspects. So that means now, if I'm doing, let's try it, api.pomrp.julien.work, I'm supposed to be redirect to my application. So that's the API. It's a basic and really straightforward, but just to see if it's work well, from the gateway section here, I can click here and you can see requests. So I hit once. So again, let's hit multiple time just to see that it works. And let's see if I have feedbacks here. So as you can see, it works, right? And it redirects 50% of the time on API 1, API 2, just to show you how this API works. I also have a roots called ping. I think it's a basic, yeah, so it works. So that one is a basic one. And I can order, I think it's not with S. So I have orders, and so on, so on. So that one route that I have, and I'm reaching actually here. This is what we have inside the Mongo database. So yeah, that's the basic API stuff and how it works. So now that it's working, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna proceed. So say now I want to move full to the deployment number 2. If you remember, we have 50% on number 1 and 50 on number 2. I'm going to click on proceed. Normally it's supposed to, okay, so now it's done and we're supposed to have the cleaning. That means if I'm going back here, now we have 100% of the traffic redirect to number 2, 0% on number 1. And on the deployment, we don't have number 1 anymore because we just did the cleaning. Right? So let's do the same thing now for the front end, for the web part. I'm not going to explain again everything because I'm using the same logic behind the client's part. So again, clients, that's a basic web front end. Same thing, Docker file. That's a Tomcat application in that case. What I'm doing here, I'm just generating a WAR file and launching Tomcats using the Catalina shell script included inside the containers. And the Jenkins file here is exactly the same thing, right? Building, pushing to Docker Hub, changing different bunch of configuration on the YAML with the tag stuff from the Jenkins build definition, curling the API of them to deploy inside the cluster, do the 50-50 deployment, move it full, and cleaning everything. So let's again do that for the web. I'm going to create a new item now. I'm going to say it's a pipeline called PUMRP, but it's clients. Click on OK. I'm going to copy the URL here of the repo here. I'm going to say, I don't want to use the pipeline script. I want to from the SCM. It's a Git repo. This is the URL that I want. Click on save. And I can click on build. All right, so supposed to be deployed. I mean, it'll just launch the deployment. So again, let's go back to VAMP. You can see now you have the PUMRP client, right? It's deploying. And what I'm gonna do the same thing because we can do 50-50 with only one deployment. I'm gonna reject that one just for the first deployment. And I'm gonna relaunch another build to have at least 2 deployments, 1 and 2, right? All right, so back to VAMP. So we have the one running and the 2 deploying. At that time, we don't have a gateway yet. It's gonna create one gateway at that step here. So I'm just gonna wait to have that one deployed. So it's deployed. I'm gonna say yes. Now I want to do 50-50. Let's see on the gateway now. So we have a new gateway called PUMRP client. And what I did on that one, actually I can show you that because I didn't show you for the order. On deploy, this is the one I'm doing, the update gateway 50. And this is the name of the gateway, type gateway. So the ports that I'm using, and this is the virtual host that I want, and the routes with the weight, so 50 on ID pre-tag, ID tag, so number 1 and number 2, number 1, 50% of my traffic and 50% of on that one. So really straightforward again with the magic of C.I. And so yeah, so at that time we have 50-50. Let's just double check 50-50. We're supposed to answer to that URL here. So same thing. I'm gonna go on GoDaddy, click on add. It's a CNAME, but now what I want is PUMRP, and this is the same URL of my cluster. And click on save. Which means now, if we're doing just PUMRP, oh, yeah, so it's a Tomcat, as you can see, inside the path WAC MRP, we're supposed to have our application. So the basic application with dealers, quotes, orders, and delivery. So let's try orders, for example. And as you can see, we have 2 orders, and that's the same that we have here, right? That we confirmed and created. We're supposed to have here created and confirmed. So that's the web frontend talking to the API. The API is talking to the Mongo database, which is really neat. It's working, right? We have our application now. Again, same thing. We have some stat here. 50 or 50% of my traffic is redirected to one and other. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish my deployment here and say now I'm ready to say that I want to move and full to deployment number 2. And let's check here. We have 100% of our traffic redirected to number 2. And let's refresh, just to make sure that application is still responding and it works well, right? So at that time, we have our deployments, PO2, POMRP order 2, POMRP client number 2, both gateway redirecting 100% of the time on number 2. So for the API is number 2 and gateway and clients for, number 2. So let's kick off a new deployment just to make sure that everything works fine. So deployment number 3. Let's do the same thing for the API. And now I guess you understand how it works. But at that moment, that means that every time I'm going to trigger my build, it's going to do everything automatically for me, right? So deploying on VAMP, moving or waiting people to approve my deployment. So as you can see, number 3 is deployed now. So I'm going to do the same thing, 50. I'm just going to move forward and go until the full deployment here. Proceed. So number 3 for the client. And let's go back to the API here. Same thing, number 3 for the API for order and proceed. That means at that moment, we supposed to have number 3. Yeah, number 3, and both gateway on number 3. That means if, again, refreshing my application here. Oops. Yeah, working. I don't know why we have this kind of downtime, but we're not supposed to have it. So it's working, right? So now let's do real case scenario. Let's do fun. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go on inside the code of my API, and I already created one route called catalog. That means if right now, on my current version, if I'm doing whack catalog, we have nothing, right? So what I'm doing here, I implemented one routes called catalog, and I'm going to remove the comment and push my code. I'm going to save. So here I'm going to say git add, git commit. Let's do adding catalog feature. And let's do a git push. So we just push our code. That means, so again, let's say we have the CI trigger. Is not the case, but supposed to automatically trigger a new build. So that means the number 4 version supposed to have this new feature, this new catalog feature, right? This new route. What we're gonna do, we're gonna do the same thing for the web admin. Oh no, we're gonna wait. But as you can see here, so let's go back on the order. So we have this menu here. We have any reference to catalog, right? So we have dealer, codes, order, delivery. So if our code works, what we also want to have one screen, one page to managing the catalog, right? So let's anticipate that. In the meantime of rebuilding the application, we're gonna create a new view. I already did that, same thing. So here, inside the index, we're gonna say here, I want to add one button called catalog with this icon here. And for the fun, we're gonna say that's party meter number v1.1 for the title. And inside the main here, which is the menu on the left, the hamburger menu, we're gonna add also the catalog button. And same thing, we're gonna push this change, git add, git commit. and do a git push, right? And we're not gonna wait. We're gonna start the deployment. I mean, at least the build, not the deployment yet, for the client part here. And click on build now. Because we just add the approval step, that means at that moment, it's just gonna deploy, but not change the gateway. That means you're gonna wait more approval to give access to the client, let's say that. So at that moment here, back to the API, which is the first one that we launched, it just build push, prepare the script, deploy to the cluster, but nobody have access because at that moment here, the gateway, so let's check that we have the deployment number 4, and the gateway for the API is still 100% on the previous version, number 3. So again, let's refresh the catalog here. We have nothing here, right? But let's say I'm ready to test it. And in my case, it's 50-50, but let's say in a weak case, maybe it's gonna be 1090 or 595. And you can also do canary testing with VAMP. And let's say only people with this payload in this headers can reach the new version of the application, or only this IP, this different stuff. So now that we're supposed to have 50% of the traffic redirect to 3 and 4. So as you can see in the condition, you can have different tags to say if you make sure that we reach the new version, you can add tags. We're not going to do that. What we can do, let's say we're going to try with Internet Explorer, for example, because I think on that one, I clear in my cache. So if I'm doing api.pymrp.julien.work whack catalog. Awesome. Let's use Edge. He offered me to download the JSON. Well, I just want to see API. Julien.work. Let's first hit the landing page. All right, and let's say catalog. So we have nothing, but yeah. So as you can see, sometimes it works, sometimes not. It's round robin, so if 50% of the time on once and 50 on the other one, because we don't have sticky and string or different. So you can add more specific reason and configuration conditions and that kind of stuff. I encourage you to see the documentation, but it works well. That means on that moment we have 50% of the time on the new feature. So what I can do, I can now say for the order again for the API, I want to deploy 100%. I'm comfortable with the new feature that I implemented. I'm willing to move that in production. That means now we have 100% of the traffic redirect to the catalog feature. That means that every time we're going to refresh the application, now we have 100% of the time we have the catalog. So we just add a new feature. And same thing here. I have the JSON reader, so it's cleaner here. So yeah, so same thing. Still on the application by itself, the web front end. We don't have the UI yet because I'm not click on the button to deploy. But the cool thing, it's inside the API where you have the root. So that means we can do more tests, and it's kind of production for the API. That's the beauty of the microservices, right? And now for the UI. So back to our client's pipeline here. Same thing is waiting for me to approve. Oh, no, it's still pushing actually. But same concept, as you can understand. It's supposed to ask me, are you ready to deploy? So we're supposed to have the number 4 deployment here. So it's going to appear. Up, as you can see here, it's deploying. That means that we are at that step here. So it's deploying, and the number 4 is the one with the UI. Remember, we just had the catalog button. So let's wait. Same thing at that moment, the UI is still the same because the gateway is still redirecting 100% of the version 3, which is, let's say, the old version. And is there, so I'm gonna say, okay, now let's do the 50-50. And let's, with Edge, do just pymrp.julien.work. Oh, it's WAC MRP here. And we have the 1.1. Oh, but so yeah, I missed something, but we're supposed to also have the button here, but whatever. As you can see, we have now the catalog thing, and because we have the API on the backend, well, yes, we have also the root, and everything works fine. So, and now let's redirect and let's hit. So that's the v.0, and on that one we don't have the feature. So for that one, it's kind of round robin. It's kind of random. And sometimes we have it. For the web, because I'm doing caching with Edge, that's the reason why I'm still on 1.0. But again, on the VAMP documentation, you have more settings, like I told you. If you want to do canary testing and so on, which is pretty neat. Let's say every time you're gonna have this browser, this I don't know, mobile application or whatever, you can redirect to the new version, which is cool. You can engage with your customers and say, let's do canary testing. And for that customer, we're going to add this specific headers to tag them and to give them access to the new feature. So now that, let's try it here, what we have here. So we have the version still 1.0. I think I'm doing caching also in that case. But let's say it works fine. So again, same thing on the clients, just to make sure we have 50-50, some statistic, which is really cool. And here I'm gonna say I'm ready to move full on new version, 100% on version 4. It's done. Let's refresh. We are on version 1.1 and we have our catalog here. So that's it. And now, as you can imagine, if I'm building, we're gonna have version 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so on. So that's my quick presentation, not quick because I think it's around 50 or 45 minutes now, but my discovery about the VAMP products using on DCOS. I encourage you to, or if you want to do the same thing, basically, the repo is public. So the parts unlimited MRP repo are public. Use it. Vamp.io, that's documentation. If you want to try DCOS, you can do that with Azure. Azure, you have a free subscription on Azure for $100, I think. It's way more enough to deploy and play with the cluster for a few days. It's very simple. Just deploy once, generate SSH key, and connect like I did with the SSH command line. And that's it. I hope you enjoy the content. Let me know if you have feedbacks or questions, and see you the next one. Bye-bye.